Right on. Happy Climate Week. We are going to have a conversation about underrepresented founders, and we're really excited about it. My name is Todd Khozein. I'm the founder and CEO of SecondMuse. We are an innovation and a company who is building resilient economies around the world, predominantly in climate and in well-being economy space. We have been working with climate tech entrepreneurs for about 16 years now. We've had the opportunity to support thousands of businesses, about 150 in the state of New York over the last, little less than a decade or so. And we've had a really good opportunity to learn about, obviously, what founders are more likely to do well and what founders are more likely to succeed. Would love to share some of the stuff that we've learned. And I'm super excited about sharing the stage with my dear friend and colleague, Jade Garrett.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jade Garrett. I am the executive director of NWX, which is an Xcelerator program for Black founders in the built environment in the Pacific Northwest. And I have the privilege to have met Todd from SecondMuse, and we've been talking about how we can learn from each other because we have, I would say, different approaches, but really very similar intent and trajectory. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that's right. So a couple of years ago, the EPA put out a report specifically focused on social vulnerability, and there were some really frightening sort of numbers that sort of came out of there, as we've spoken about on a couple occasions. And so we know that Black and African Americans are 40% more likely to live in areas that are going to experience the highest rate of deaths as a result of severe climate, and this is based on a projection of 2-degree increase. We know that Native Americans and Alaska Natives are 48% more likely to live in areas that are going to experience the most severe inundation as a result of sea rise. We know that low-income individuals and those without a high school diploma are 25% more likely to live in an area that is going to experience the most severe job reduction. And when we think about what is the relationship between this and being a climate founder, one of the things that we've seen over and over again is that the best founders are going to be ones that have an intuitive and lived experience of the problem itself. So they understand all the nuances of the challenge and the problem they're trying to solve, but also that they're highly motivated to solve it. And when I think about, what is the historic history of human civilization reason that motivates us to do things like protection of our family and protection of our community ranks pretty high at the top.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the approach that you had here in Brooklyn, in New York itself, is actually what we're trying to do together in Portland. And one of the issues is that you wouldn't go to a different country that you didn't speak the language of without an interpreter. So we're taking the same approach of doing that in Portland, where we at NWX, we're still supporting our first cohort that started over a year and a half ago, because we wanted to learn from them. We wanted to understand really what it is they're going through, their lived experience. But you're talking about statistics, right? But they're talking about how, they're sharing back with us how it really hits them, how it hits their bank account, how it affects them from getting jobs, and all those types of things. So, but I mean, even Indigenous as well, those are some of the things we're looking at exploring as well together. So.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always admired so much is the sort of focus and the rigor that you put into understanding the actual experience of the entrepreneurs instead of giving some cookie cutter solution to something. I mean, entrepreneurship is a beast. It's really, really super hard. Hardware is even harder. We know that. We know that because you need extraordinary technical expertise, not just to develop your technology, but to integrate it in what is oftentimes super complicated tech stacks. And so your technological prowess, as it were, actually is essential for not just the development of your product, but actually your sales. Oftentimes, these are highly regulated environments that are really risk intolerant, which makes it even difficult. And money might not bring happiness, but it solves a lot of problems when you're a climate tech entrepreneur. And we know that the capital landscape is pretty biased against underrepresented communities.
Absolutely. We could even talk numbers, but Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, 1 to 1.5% of venture capital in 2022 went to Black and Latino founders. We know that less than 2% went to women founders, and we know that 0.1% went to Black and Latina women founders. And so there's a but there are things that you can do to reduce the burden of capital. You're going to still need capital, and that's a problem that clearly needs solving. But there's things that you can do from a support standpoint and a technical assistance standpoint to be able to sort of make the complexity and difficulty of taking a climate tech businesses to market a little bit easier, right?
Absolutely. And, talking about our programs, we were sharing kind of, like what's the alignment, what's the trajectory, but also like where do we stay in our lanes, right? Your lane is definitely, like for venture, like kind of scoped organizations, right? For example, NWX, we're learning from our founders where there's other avenues where maybe venture isn't the right fit or calibration. But we still want places for them to go and be able to, move forward. But especially with hardware, in Portland right now, we don't have an innovation space. We don't have a safe space for entrepreneurs to go and, build things and, like kind of tinker, whereas like what you've done with Newlab, you've kind of like taken all of these little maker spaces in New York and kind of combined them together into an ecosystem, not where you're like squashing them. You're actually providing like the roadway, like in between, all these different places. So I'm excited to do that in Portland.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about this idea of kind of like different organizations working together. I mean, I think organizations, if we would have, I can't remember when Newlab actually opened up. It was 2016, is that right? Somebody can correct me if that's wrong, but. I mean, if you would have come here a decade ago or 12 years ago, it was a bit of a desert, right? I mean, like there was a stranded real estate assets. There wasn't a huge amount of activity going on. There weren't a huge number of hardware entrepreneurs. When I know that we first started working with the city and with the state, but it was a bunch of organizations. I mean, like that were it wasn't. There was a comment in the previous panel about how climate tech is more collaborative, and it's almost like it's more collaborative because we have to be more collaborative, but it also sends a signal that you can go from not a lot to a vibrant, robust, thriving, creative economy in a pretty short period of time. I mean, 12 years is a blink of an eye, kind of economically. And to think that there was a bunch of organizations, I mean, you see what Urban Future Labs is doing with NYU. You're seeing what our friends at Elemental Xcelerator are doing with Finance New Orleans. You're seeing what Newlab has been able to sort of accomplish to go from strength to strength. There's so many organizations that are ultimately working really, really closely together to create it, and it kind of gives a signal of, oh wow, you could actually move from not a lot to a ton in a reasonably short period of time, especially because we're talking about a $100 trillion economic transition over the course of the next 25 years.
Absolutely. Yep. So could you tell me more, like NWX takes a grassroots approach, but, can you tell me more about how SecondMuse has like hyper-focused on, underserved, but also like I would say non-traditional founders. And I mean, what I've seen so far has been incredible, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what fundamentally I feel like the thesis that we have is actually not even a moral thesis. Fundamentally, it's actually an economic thesis. Innovation. I think we see innovation literally as the intersect. I mean, innovation is literally the intersection of difference. It's when two different ways of seeing the world or seeing an opportunity come together that you create an entirely new approach to being able to do something extraordinary. And part of how we think, a big part of how we think, is influenced by how we grew up and where we grew up. You and I have talked about our sort of experience growing up, and it's so different. And it's like, oh wow! So if I can actually align the way I see the world and the way I think about the world with the way you see the world and the way you experience the world, then we might be able to come up with something, a solution that ultimately would make us more competitive in the market. In a way that we never would have been able to come up with alone, and that's a fundamentally economic argument. I mean, that's a way to de-risk our stock portfolios by diversification. We're terrified about the loss of biodiversity because diversity equals strength. So it makes absolute sense that we would want to actually increase diversity at every level in our economic activity because that's where we're going to get the most creative ideas.
Yeah, and so I wanted to pick your brain, right? Because, we're still with our first cohort. Our first cohort, we took them to RE+. We wanted to bring them to this one conference, after they fabricated something that was a proof of concept so that they would be able to convey that their idea had merit so that they could get a contract or like a customer or investment. But, you know, as we were walking here, right, we saw Frank from, I forget what venture, but, you know, he had an actual demonstration of the plants he was growing. He's like, here are my beets, you know what I mean? But, I mean, how did he, I would say, like, a founder like him be able to, like, access SecondMuse, you know? Because that's, I would say, one of the big struggles that I would say diversity, like underserved founders actually, you know, understand that this is an opportunity or it's a real opportunity.
Yeah.
You know? Not like a puppet show.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right. Yes, that's Frank from Renewable. Definitely check him out. He's got a cool technology. It's a really interesting circularity technology that going into development of agricultural products. So I mean, in this case, we had the great privilege of being funded by NYSERDA and having an opportunity to work with our partners at NextCore to provide a lot of this programming. The city and the state has continuously been a pretty strong advocate. I mean, there's the New York Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that has been able to sort of direct 40% of resources towards underprivileged communities, but has also given some pretty aggressive climate goals for the city and the state. You know, achieving net zero electricity by 2040 and decoupling with fossil fuels. And so I think that there's a really big role for government to play to be able to say, hey, we're setting a target over here. And I think that when we go back to the things about, you know, we're setting a targets to be able to do it in other places, things will happen. And I'm wondering if you might be able to say a couple things about what your aspirations are for the work that you have already done and what you intend to do in Oregon. I know that we've had conversations about that.
Yeah, well, so we're definitely looking at launching our second cohort, but still really actually finding, like, what does success mean for our founders, right? Because we haven't been able to dial that in quite yet, because there's just, I would say, a different ecosystem in the Pacific Northwest than there is, I would say, for VC investment versus, like, you know, like nonprofit, you know, like whatever route they're taking. So we're looking at, like, on a pre-accelerator level, kind of like doing some type of understanding of, like, this is a financial kind of like path you need to take, because if you want to have your business, right, where you want to run it for the rest of your life, do not take VC investment, right? Whereas, you know, I would say entrepreneurship has been over glamorized, where they think it's one thing, where, like, people are just throwing you money. No, it's not. You have golden handcuffs that you have obligations, fiduciary responsibilities, like, and these founders, right? They're still trying to figure out, you know, like, how do I not work, you know, like 2 jobs, and then also, like, try to, you know, like, start my own business, you know, do my startup and stuff. So, you know, kind of understanding, okay, what financial kind of models might actually kind of be a better pathway, you know? So, but have you done that with SecondMuse?
Yeah, I think it's been, certainly blended capital sort of stacks are definitely a reality in climate, in particular in climate, even more so than in other spaces. We actually just hosted an event on this stage on Monday where we had a showcase for a lot of our earlier stage entrepreneurs, a program called Venture for Climate, and they, you know, while they were able to raise, you know, a little over 80 million in venture capital, they were actually raised a little over 40 million in non-dilutive capital, and so that non-dilutive capital ends up playing an essential role in the capital stack. Also, can add to the complexity of building climate tech businesses, but it definitely ends up being you know, an integral part of the development of effective business.
And one thing that ties us was the American Made program, right? NWX, they won the Epic Prize Round 2, whereas you're still competing in Epic Round 3, right? You know, how do you feel that the type of funding that the American Made program offers, which is, you know, no strings attached, no deliverables, it's almost like a straight up cash award. How is that allowing you and SecondMuse to, like, be able to actually put the money towards the founders, towards finding them, towards, you know, like, recruiting them or fostering them?
Yeah, well, real quick, since we just got the signal, I think one of the values of non-dilutive capital is there's actually extraordinary technical rigor that goes through being able to get them, and so that actually helps with on the diligence side. But I'm wondering to turn it around for you to offer some last words before we head out. If you were to offer advice to others in the room that are interested in supporting underrepresented founders or marginalized entrepreneurs, but are currently might not or might be doing enough, I'm wondering if you could offer a few words of wisdom in terms of what things that they might be able to do.
Ooh, words of wisdom. I would say try to understand their lived experience, but also, we talked about how your greatest strength can also be your greatest weakness. But also look at how, let's say, the fact that they come from non-traditional backgrounds that you don't have any insight into, probably sometimes. But look at how that can be leveraged, but also amplified to actually make real change happen, because it's not going to happen with just one group of people. It's not going to happen with one, solution. So look at how you could actually change the angle of instead of maybe they're different, actually look at it as oh, you've got an advantage, because every founder that I've worked with at NWX or an underserved founder in general, they can take the world down. I mean, yeah. So
you're amazing, Jade. Thank you so much for sharing the stage.
Todd, thank you so much. It's been amazing.